Steve Gurney has performed many amazing things in his life so far. He has won the Coast to Coast endurance race a record 9 times, travelled across the Sahara on wind power, waxed himself completely for Dancing with the Stars, written inspirational books, and invented cool things. He has been willing to step well outside his comfort zone many times and make the most of his physical talents while continually enhancing his mental skills. Welcome, Steve, to Goals and Growth.
Thank you. Cool. Good to be here.
Great stuff. Thanks, Steve. Steve, first question, where are you now and what are you currently involved in? Obviously, we're doing this as a Skype call, so you're somewhere on the other side of the world.
Yes, I'm in Germany at the moment with my partner, Verena.
Fantastic.
And I'm over here. Well, we're speakers. We speak at conferences and we run workshops. So spending half a year over in Europe and half the year in New Zealand.
Brilliant, and the perfect half of the year to be over there, actually.
Well, we're coming back in a few weeks to catch the ski season, so we're just waiting for the perfect snow, Pete.
We haven't had a lot. We had a bit early on in the season, but we've had precious little since then, really. Okay, thanks for that, Steve. Let me focus on the Coast to Coast, which you are very famous for here in New Zealand. The Coast to Coast endurance race. You have won it, as I said, a record 9 times, but you've also competed in it a total of 19 times. Just for anyone who doesn't know much about the Coast to Coast, it's a total of 243 kilometres from the west coast of New Zealand, South Island, and to Christchurch on the east side. It includes about 70 kilometres of kayaking, often through rapids, a 30+ kilometre mountain pass run, and lots of cycling as well. The best time ever is around 10.5 hours. What made you decide to do this, and how did you prepare for your race? The first race, actually, I'm curious about that.
Yeah, good question. Well, I was at university and bumped into Robin Judkins, the eccentric and highly intelligent organiser and pioneer of the race. And I was just in the city somewhere, I think a picture theatre or something like that. And he exuded so much enthusiasm about this event that he was about to organise. I was totally sold on it. And I'd already done a bit of recreational kayaking and biking and running, so I thought, oh mate, this is for me. It's perfectly designed. I reckon I can win this. And so I felt really hard. I didn't enter the first race because I was still finishing my studies and I was finding the engineering degree, quite challenging. So I think it was the third race he ran that I did as I entered, and I thought I could win it. My goal was to win it, and I failed, and I came 22nd, which to me was a huge failure. I had my sights set on winning, which is a bit of a window into the determination and perseverance that I had. So I didn't see that as failure, though. I thought, well, I just need to adjust the way I train. And to cut a long story short, it was 5 events before I won it. So I came 22nd, then 3rd, then 2nd, then 2nd, then I finally won it. And so, I wasn't put off by failure. And, that's the story, really. And then from then on, I had, the next few years, I had a couple of wins and a couple of second places again. And it wasn't until I'd had a severe attack of leptospirosis, it's a blood poison I caught.
That's terrible. I read about that. Oh my goodness, you almost died.
Yeah, it was pretty close. I was in intensive care on 3 life support machines. So, but the point I want to make out of that is it was a very close call. And when life flashes in front of your eyes, it makes you realise what really matters at that time. And at that time, winning races was really important to me. So despite the doctor's advice to give up, I had a couple of years off and then came back to racing again and was even more winning. I won more races because my goals were really aligned with what seemed to be important in my life at that time. So I won 7 in a row after that.
Wow, that's a real achievement. I guess that indicates the persistence and the mental toughness to initially endure the failures too. I suppose if I was to go back to the goals aspect, your goal, as you said, for the first race was to win. When you got 22nd, and you mentioned that you didn't see it as a failure, you saw it as an opportunity to think, obviously you're disappointed, but you thought, let's look at where I can improve my training, and you know, how can I get better at this?
And I've done a lot of research since, you know, in the latter half of my professional career, which is 20 years long, I got interested in sports psychology and specifically in NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming.
Yeah.
And I mean, it sounds a fancy title, but it's actually just simply understanding what do people do in their heads in terms of what they see, what they say to themselves, those sorts of things. Visual, auditory, kinesthetic things. What do they do that gets them the results in their lives, and how can I learn from others, and how can I learn from the research, and how can I learn from myself, and you know, being present enough to notice what do I think and say and visualize, and how can I adjust that to get better results. And so part of that research I did on sports psychology shows that successful people don't see failure as failure. They see all results as useful. You know, failure is just feedback. You know, there's a quote from some successful athlete, I think it was a motocross rider, that says, sometimes I win, sometimes I learn, but I never fail.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the attitude, I think, of if you choose goals that are really important to you, that align with your purpose on the planet, or, you know, reason for existing, then you won't fail. I mean, you don't see failure as failure. You see failure as that sort of feedback I'm talking about.
Yeah. Now that's a pretty challenging first up goal to set. Now I believe, you know, a lot. I mean, if you think about it, you know, one day. I mean, that's at least. I mean, if you're doing it for the first time, probably realistically, it's at least 12 hours of continual effort, at least, which is on the same level, if not. And personally, I would sort of say it. Not that I've ever done it, not that I've ever done either. But if you look at the the triathlon, the 180 k's, the marathon, and the 3.75 or so kilometre swim. In this particular case, you're probably doing a pretty similar sort of a distance and using a pretty similar set of muscles, but you're doing it in quite a more, I suppose you'd say, in many ways, a more challenging terrain, dare I say.
Yes, and you bring up a good point, Pete, that, I mean, your goals have to be realistic. You know, there's no point aiming to be the top tennis player if you've got a problem with your shoulder joint or something like that. You know, you're never ever going to get there. And so you have to pick realistic goals. And perhaps my first goal was a bit optimistic. You know, to win your very first event is pretty unlikely. But I was naive enough at the time. But there's a little saying that says, you know, aim for the stars, and if you don't quite make it, then at least you've got to the moon. You know, you've got to set some sort of goals, and if you do bite off more than you can chew, that's okay. At least you're putting yourself outside your comfort zone, and you're learning and doing and growing, and that's okay. But you know, so I'm saying pick realistic goals. Yep. And don't overachieve. But sometimes you don't know what overachieving is, and also I think, you know, we're only on this planet for one life. You know, a short time in this lifetime. So you may as well pick really audacious goals, you know, really challenging goals, right outside your comfort zone. And that's when you feel a sense of, wow, I'm really doing something with my life, instead of just sitting back watching TV. I'm out there giving it a go, and whether I achieve it or not is kind of secondary. Yeah. The fact that I'm in it for the journey is the most important part.
And that's a really good lead-in for my next question. The commitment in training must be, not that I've ever done it myself, but I can only imagine it must be huge for such an endurance event. What is the motivation for you to get up early? Sorry? Yeah, sorry.
I didn't see the training as huge. I thought, this has to be done. That's all. That's what you have to do. Go and do it. Don't even moan about it. Don't even think about how hard it is. If you can do it, do it. And I think that's indicative of a good goal. If you've chosen a good goal, you won't see it as hard or challenging. You'll just say, right, I'm going to go and do it.
Because you're making choices. You were mentioning before. You could sit on the couch, you know, you could go to the pub, you know, I imagine, you know, when you first started this, you know, you were young, you were fresh out of uni, you probably wanted a bit of a relax from studies and so on and so forth. So this, you know, you could have taken the route of having a relax, or you could, or you obviously what you did was go into training. So this was a choice, and did you see it as a sacrifice, or did you see it as an opportunity?
Absolutely didn't see it as a sacrifice. It was definitely an opportunity. It was something at the time I really wanted to achieve this goal, and it wasn't until 18 or 20 years later, when I was forced to retire due to a bad injury, that I realised what my motivation really was. And I think this is a good point to talk about with respect to goals as well. How do I start and keep it simple? Well, my drive in those days was, I was a young man. I was wanting to get out into the world and prove myself,
Yeah.
And I wanted to make a name for myself. I guess in those days I wanted to be famous,
Mm-hmm.
But in hindsight, when I had some very serious depression when I had to quit at age 45 or whatever it was. No, 41, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
I had damaged the cartilage in my ankle, and I had a couple of reconstructions on my ankle, and it still didn't work. I wasn't able to run fast enough to win races anymore. I can still run, but it hurts too much. So that was 2 years of suicidal depression, I must admit, in the end. And the specialist wanted me to take antidepressant drugs, and I nearly did. But then I thought, no, well, and there's no right or wrong about that. Whatever works for you is fine. But I thought, well, if you understand a bit about sports psychology and the science of winning, how about use that same psychology to understand what's going on in my brain that causes depression? And it took a lot of counselling, a lot of reading, a lot of going on a lot of courses, and a lot of help from friends. But finally, to cut a long story short, I asked the question, why was winning so important to me?
Mm-hmm.
Why was achieving goals so important? And that led a chain of like dominoes to what's the answer to the meaning of life? It's quite a big question. And I found
not much
my
bigger.
answer through a lot of soul searching, and that's what I wrote my Lucky Legs book about. It was, of course, Lucky Legs is about stories about racing, but it includes chapters on what did I discover during those depression years, and how did I use sport psychology, and how did I use understanding my brain to get out of that. And I think I'll share with you what pertains or what relates to goal setting.
Thank you.
You see, in those early days when I said I wanted to prove myself, it was an ego thing. And I've since, in that study period, I've read a book called The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle.
Yep, heard of it and read it.
Eckhart Tolle has written a few books, A New Earth, Stillness Speaks.
Yeah.
But The Power of Now is kind of this famous one. And the key principle it talks about is that a lot of humans live in the future. A lot of humans, for example me, I lived in the future. I'll be happy once I've won the coast to coast. And which implies, of course, that I'm not happy at the moment, and I'm relying on something to complete me in the future.
Yeah.
And I think this is the main problem we've got to be careful of when we choose goals. And I think my goal in those days was to prove myself. Something happened, or some stuff happened as a kid, like we all do. We all have stuff happen as children, as we're growing up, that we believe something's wrong with us. Some people don't have much wrong with them. Some people are really driven by trying to fix what's wrong with them. And I believed I wasn't good enough. I wasn't lovable enough. Some stuff happened as a kid.
Yeah.
It actually wasn't true, but we believed it was true because we don't have a full picture of what the world is. And so we make this statement about ourselves and we live it out. And I was trying to prove by winning races that I could prove I was special and I was a good human being. And so after 20 years of professional racing and winning many races, being hugely successful at dominating my sport, I got off what I thought was the ladder to success. But it turns out I hadn't gone anywhere. I was back on a hamster wheel. I just stepped off back at the same space I was. I was still unhappy. And I was trying to use my sport to as a goal to get happy. And I think it's really important, I think, if we're going to avoid that mistake I fell into, like most humans do, and we can't be too hard on ourselves for trying. And like I said before, aim for the stars, and if you don't quite get it, it's still good. You make good progress. Then, I didn't quite achieve happiness through sport, through these goals, but I did learn a lot about myself. And I think the key to this is to when you set goals, get a sense of what your purpose on the planet is, what your mission in life might be, and then make sure any goals you set match or support that purpose or that mission that you're on.
Yeah.
And I know it's a really big subject. You're trying to figure out what your purpose on the planet is almost impossible for most people, but I encourage you to have the courage to ask that question and figure out, well, what is important to me in life? And one way to start is to list off the values. Like, imagine you're a 100-year-old great-grandfather or great-grandmother, and you've got your great-grandchildren at your feet, and you're giving them advice on how to live their life as youngsters, as young kids. What things matter to them, and those are the kind of values you live your life by, and that's what you want to make sure your goals align with.
Actually, it's a good point you mentioned that, Steve, because I've heard a couple of things. There's your resume virtues, which talk about academic achievements or perhaps sporting achievements and so on and so forth, and then there's the eulogy virtues. Eulogy virtue is probably what you're referring to here, and that they're examples of when you're on your deathbed, dare I say, and you're looking back, and these are the things that essentially you want people to talk about you. I mean, yes, they may talk about your sporting achievements, but they'll also talk about your virtues in the sense of the kindness or the generosity, the spirit of never giving up and things like that.
Yes, exactly what I'm talking about. And you've also got to have courage when you do this, to first of all ask the hard question, but secondly, to be able to drop off stuff and say no to things that you find out are not matching or not supporting your values or your purpose.
Yeah.
One classic example of this is watching TV. How many of us in our lives have, in some time in the past, wasted hours, days, months
I've done that.
Shit TV. Throw the bloody thing out the window or give it away, and start spending your evenings doing wholesome things like reading good books or talking to your family, talking to your partner, spending quality time with people, or going out and doing sport, and or achieving your goal. I think other things like Facebook, how much was waste time on social media, just stuff like that. It's pretty simple. Even the friends you keep, so if you've done your purpose thing, you've got you don't have to have an exact idea of what your purpose or mission is, just a bit of a feeling for it, what's important in life, and then choose goals that support that. And if you find you're hanging out with friends that don't match or don't support you, then perhaps you choose different friends. Those are the sacrifices I'm talking about doing, checking that is your ecology, or is this other stuff in your life supporting where you want to be.
From your experience, Steve, do you think? I mean, I'm a similar age to you, so I've been through periods of real challenge where I found it very difficult to understand my purpose. Do you think that, and you as you get older, hopefully we find some, dare I say, worldly wisdom from our experiences. Do you think that you need to? From your experiences and the people that you've seen, do you think that you need to go through these, really challenging experiences to find that wisdom? I suppose what I'm saying is, can you get it from a book? Do you have to live it to dare I say believe it?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I love this sort of discussion. We may not have the right answers or get answers here, but at least we're discussing it. I think it's important. Yes, you can get an idea of this sort of wisdom by reading many of the wholesome sort of books about the subject, books that interest you, about goal setting or about values or about cultural differences, about these social questions that we have, debates we have. You can read it from those sorts of books. But I think the real gold lies in challenges that you've had in your life. I mean, there's a saying, like for example, when you had the Christchurch earthquakes, there's a saying that says you see the real person when that person is faced with trauma. And so when the earthquake struck in Christchurch, where I used to live, I saw people for who they really are. And so we can go back in our lives and think about times where we were stressed or things that we didn't like happen, like losing a job or getting an illness, or having someone in the family die, or a friend die, stuff where we found we were traumatized or under pressure, and just notice, what did we learn from that? Like it's like I said before, it's not failure, it's just feedback. What can we learn from things that don't go the way we want? What can we learn from life's disappointments? And what does that show us about our true character, or who we'd like to be? And I think the key to it is to be present, or living in the moment, rather than acting like an animal through fight or flight and have our emotions run us. As humans, we have a frontal lobe in our brain, and we're able to step back and observe. And the key is to observe with a loving heart. Don't.
Yeah.
I had to do this. I look back at my past, and I said, Steve, you bloody idiot. What did you do that for? That's not loving and impartial. I need to look back at my past and say, wow, Steve, that was interesting that you acted like that, or you said that, or you responded that way. It's interesting.
Rather than punishing yourself.
And that's where I think wisdom comes from.
Mm-hmm. There's sorry?
There's many other ways too. I mean, going to get counsel from a wise mentor or a friend, that's another way of learning wisdom. But certainly, when challenges strike us, that's when the true learning happens, if we're open to it as an opportunity. Instead of seeing challenges as an obstacle, we need to have an open mind. And I remember back in my engineering design school class, we were designing gearboxes and motors and things, and our design tutor said to us, there's always more than one right answer. You don't have to design all the exact same motors or gearboxes. You can have many variations, and so it is in life. There's always more than one right way to do stuff. You can often ask, well, how would someone else do that? How would I do that? But also, how would someone else do that? And someone else, what would they say, or what would they respond? And that's another place you can find wisdom as well.
It's a good, another good sort of link in with one of the questions I've got here. One thing I have found that is really impressive about you is your sense of innovation in developing solutions to problems, your problems. I mean, oftentimes people look at, sort of other people to solve their problems. But in your case, from what I've read, it's, you've looked for those solutions yourself. And they're not just mental solutions, but they're also practical physical things like Gurney goo. In fact, I've even used it on my kids for their nappy rash, and it worked very well, so thank you for that. So what can you share with others about your mindset of being solution focused? That to reach your goals may require you to create new ways of doing things, or new products, for example.
Okay, cool. So let's just clarify for the listeners. Gurney goo is an anti-chafing, anti-blister product that you usually put on your feet or on your crutch, or where pack straps are rubbing, wherever you get chafing and blisters.
Yes.
So that's the sort of thing there. So we invented that because Vaseline wasn't doing the job. It wasn't lasting long enough for our adventure races. So to answer your question, like I said, it's an understanding, to have an open mind, to understand there's always more than one right answer. And we're going to need that more and more with the world. The world's changing all the time, more and more actually, especially in a technological way. As technology develops, things that we couldn't do 2 weeks ago or 2 months ago or 2 years ago, we can do now because things change, and it always will be the case. It's always going to be the way too with climate change. We're getting stuff. Our environment is changing, and so I think it's important to have an open mind, and there's a kind of playfulness that goes with that. We often get stuck in, how horses have blinkers on their eyes, they can just see straight ahead. Yes. Well, we often get blinkered in the way of in the way we live. I've got to do it this way because it's the way we've always done it. And we get this at work. You've got to do it that way because we've always done it that way. But things, if you have an open mind, you can find, well, actually, there might be a better way of doing this, or a more fun way of doing this. Or it's not just about efficiency, it's about fun. I think fun and enjoyment in life is really important. So if you're getting bored by doing it a certain way, try a different way. Be playful, When I go for a run each morning, I don't just go plodding along the track. I jump over logs and over handrails and bits and pieces. I try and make it fun every time and different. And I think that's where innovation happens, is by thinking, well, how could someone else do this? Or what's a better way? Or how can we have more fun doing this?
Fantastic, Steve. Thank you so much finally, and this is just a response to what you've been saying, so it's perfect that I've already written the question for this. You seem to love life and the opportunities it offers while not taking it too seriously, to have a laugh about yourself. How do you think that way of viewing life helps you fulfill your goals?
Oh, good question. I love it. Well, part of my answer comes from that, like in 1996, and you realise, well, there was I got lots of get well cards sent to me in hospital, and one of them had a little printout from the website, a desiderata, where an old lady on her deathbed asked someone to take notes, as she was in the last day. She said, well, if I lived life again, I'd do it differently, and she listed off all the things she'd do differently, and I thought, wow, that's actually, she said, first of all, I've had a good innings, I'm 92, it's a good life, but, whenever there's a but, there's something to learn. And so I thought, well, that's tragic actually, because she died with what effectively is a list of regrets. She'd wished she'd done things differently, and I don't ever want to die with a list of regrets.
No.
And so that's what motivates me to have fun. And I think, it's about being childlike, not childish. With a glint in your eye, a sparkle in your eye, a smile on your face. Be playful about life. And research shows very clearly there are a couple of things in life that release the right endorphins. One is laughing and having fun. Another one is a three-letter word I probably can't say on here.
I think people can understand what that is.
It's all pure, healthy, and natural. There's nothing unnatural about it. These laughter and sex are two really good things to do that release the right hormones. And so I think it's really important to go through life looking through the eyes of a child. You're not childish, but childlike, playful, and having fun. And you're being a good role model to people, but also that's when the opportunities happen. And you're sending out the right vibrations which attract similar vibrations, like a tuning fork on a piano wire. If you vibrate a certain way, you'll attract people and experiences that vibrate in that fun way back again. And isn't that what life's about? Is you want to die with a big smile on your face.
Too right. Thanks so much for sharing your wisdom with us on goal setting and your achievements, and as I said, your wisdom from a very good innings so far. I'm sure there's plenty more to come. So thanks so much once again, Steve.
My pleasure. Really good interview. Thank you.